Welcome to Code Weaver's offices. I'm Sean, and I'm joined today to talk all things consumer duty by the compliance guys.
I'm John. I'm one of the co-directors of the compliance guys.
And I'm Nick, and I'm the other co-director of the compliance guys.
Consumer duty, deadlines looming. How do you think we are as an industry and the retail sector in terms of...
Nowhere near. Nowhere near ready. Nowhere near ready. And that's from lenders, brokers, and definitely dealers. Nick?
Yeah, I think you, like with any of these regulation changes, you get people who've engaged in it really early and done the best job, although a lot of people fumble around in the dark, and I think you've got people who have left it to the last minute, but we kind of prepared and expected that. I think what's really been good is the FCA have actually done a better job than ever of trying to give some specific guidance on consumer duty. Whether anyone's read it, I don't know, but yeah, so we'll see. It's going to come out in the wash, isn't it?
So what do you think were the biggest gaps, the biggest concerns you think at the minute with, how long have we got to go now? What, 7 weeks? Something like that? 6, 7 weeks.
The biggest gaps... Well, it's the knowledge. It's we deal mainly in the independent market, and I'd say 9 times out of 10, the people that we speak to, when we say, "What are you doing about consumer duty?" the answer that we get is, "What's consumer duty?"
Or whatever my lender's told me to do about it.
I don't have to worry about it. Yeah, my lender have done all that's all sorted for me, and it isn't. What that's going to look like coming up or 31st of July or the 1st of August, I think it's just going to be hectic for us. It's just going to be mental. So,
I think, as a whole with consumer duty, I think the way I've tried to explain it to people, which really gets the head around it, is that if you were buying a new business and you had to look at 4 things to improve that business, you'd look at what products you offer, what price you offer them at, whether you're supporting your customers, and whether they're understanding everything that's being done, and ultimately that's all we're being asked to do with consumer duty. It's got to be a good business exercise, and I think with any new regulation, you take it in a positive light, you're gonna find it easier than running scared of it.
So consumer duty for retailers, opportunity or risk?
A bit of both, really, isn't it? But we look at it as an opportunity. If you get your sales process correct, all your ducks in a row, as I always like to say, then you've got nothing to worry about.
Yeah, something we've commented before is that it's all well giving guidance to people who are already engaged, but how do we engage the people who aren't engaged? And you've got to really do it in simple terms and make people understand it's not something to be scared of, and it can be a benefit. So I think it will be a net benefit, especially as we move away from have you ticked this box to as a business as a whole, are you doing the right things?
Yeah. So what's your, you're obviously dealing with loads of independent retailers going around. What's the one thing you're telling them with what 7 weeks to go? What's the main thing? What's the...
It's the question about vulnerable customers.
We were talking about that earlier.
That's the big question. Yeah. And it's, I say to a dealer, right, how many vulnerable customers have you had in the last, just 6 months, a year, last month? Then all will say, how many?
0.
Yeah, all will say 0. The FCA's interpretation of that is that it's 52% of their customers. That's 52% of your customers are vulnerable, classed as vulnerable in some way, shape or form. You have a very good point about the word vulnerable.
Yeah, I don't like the word vulnerable. I think whether you think yourself as vulnerable, someone else is vulnerable, it's a really negative thing. And I think a better wording is additional needs or circumstances. So it can be that someone's not vulnerable, but just has something where they're going to need help within the journey, because we all have quite a rigid journey. And, it could be as simple as someone doesn't really understand or like to read long documents. Let's put a video in front of them. That could be a positive step. It doesn't mean we have to think that someone is, got a real problem that's going to stop them buying a car or stop them get finance.
The one that we speak to quite a few lenders, and one of the ones that has constantly come up is the bit about price and fair value. Lots of lenders seem to be dealing with that in different ways. You've got your lenders that are in the captive space that can rock up and go, well, we subvent, we've got deposit allowances, that's their evidence for that. How do you see the lenders actually going about that in the independent space?
Well, we've done a big project on, I think it's about 30 lenders so far, where we've actually analysed all the price and value assessments. You can imagine any car dealer or even broker trying to do this piece of work, which is why we've done it almost on their behalf. We've assessed all the documents, tried to categorise it into what they do, what they don't do. And I think the biggest thing is that they're so different, the documents.
Absolutely.
And so it's very difficult to get it. I don't think there's any lenders who've really come back and gone, we don't think we've got this right. But there's two sides to that. I think one, people don't want to say they're wrong. But equally, I think the lenders have done a great job over the last handful of years of trying to make sure that at least when they get a customer, that they're doing the right thing. I think the big thing is going to be the interpretation of all the dealers' lenders and whether they're using the right ones.
So do you think the lenders, would you say at the minute, the lenders and people like you guys that are offering that professional compliance support, you all on the same page?
No.
Definitely not.
No, there's some lenders, saying, well, make sure you've got all your documents in place, which to me is completely against what Consumer Duty is about. And you've got some lenders, going in and saying, well, do take some support. And that's not selfish. It's kind of like, can you do it yourself or do you need help with it? And that's always a good thing.
So do you think, with that sort of comment, that everybody's got their head around the manufacturing chain and the fact that it is everybody involved in that chain now?
Well, I think early on everyone thought that the manufacturer was just going to be the lender, and that the broker would be a distributor. The FCA put out some guide. You got this really early on, didn't you? And I actually thought in that way to start with. But of course, if you are designing a service, so you can alter the rate, or especially for leasing brokers, for instance, we get involved in, where they're charging a documentation fee. Anything where you are designing what goes out, let's say, to dealers who then offer the service, you are a co-manufacturer, and there are very few people in the broker market who've done that price and value assessment for April.
Yeah, I'd imagine. So in terms of what you're doing specifically, I think you've got some documentation, some guidance notes.
Yeah, we give away
through that.
Yeah, we give away a free implementation plan first and foremost, which should have been in place by the 31st of October last year. And some people going, "Can I have that now?" Yeah, that's fine. Have it free. And we just put together a nice kind of easy, just guide, isn't it? Consumer duty guide. That's there. Plus, as well, our platinum package that will cover. It's not quite fitted in yet. We're doing a lot of upgrading and development work behind the scenes, but I will all
It'll
be
be
ready.
in for the 31st.
It'll be in for the 31st. You mark my words. So yeah, it's there.
And I think it's important that you don't have to pay more for compliance or have more costs. If you can record your customer journeys, know where your customers are coming from, check your reviews, get some customer feedback, you can do this exercise yourself. But I think with everything, it's kind of like, what's your time worth, isn't it, sometimes?
Yeah, it's how they can prove that, that good positive customer outcome. And that's the thing. If you say to a car dealer, how can you prove it? Right now, the customer's happy with the car they've driven away. Not quite what the FCA are after. You've got to document that, and with our system, nice plug, that we can prove that for them.
So, post 1st of August, how do you think the FCA will act in terms of following this up?
I don't think they will.
You don't think so?
And for the right reasons. That's not to say they don't care. I think what the FCA want to see is whether, with good customer outcomes, they can measure good customer outcomes. They've actually said this. They're going to be looking at FOS complaints. They're going to be looking at customer complaint data. They're going to be looking at, lending levels, everything really. And they want to see a trend that works towards things. We need to really stop people doing, being pulled up for mistakes in the moment. And I think if people are trying to do the right thing, that's what we're looking for. But as an industry, we need to make sure that we're at the forefront of doing the right thing and showing that over maybe the next 12 months.
Third parties. Obviously, we're one of them. Mm-hmm. We've had our own.
You're doing a great job, though, aren't you? You're doing a tremendous job.
Thank you. Well, it does. Thanks for the plug. Obviously, we've been in the same boat as everybody, thinking about Consumer Duty and what we need to do. Loads of lenders needing upgrades, updates to their XML API, especially things like second schedules, value-added products to make sure they're taking out securitization on Schedule 1, all of that lovely stuff. And then people interpreting that price and fair value bit. Rate for risk is one of the things that's been mentioned by a few. Some people saying they're okay, some people saying it's balanced. Do you think there's one model that's going to win out, or do you think there'll be various interpretations that'll continue?
I think rate for risk is probably the fairest because it's pushing it back onto a true end assessment rather than what a dealer's done at the front end. But competition's also healthy, and I think it's really important that that's kept because that can keep all the lenders honest. It can keep rates down for customers, and so I'd like to think that it stays, but everyone kind of gets a bit better at doing both of them.
Yeah, we speak to a lot of lenders, and we've been pushing lenders since last year to say, what do you need us to do?
Yeah.
What we do point of sale systems for people. We obviously work with retailers and offer them digital solutions, multi-lender solutions. I've been surprised we've not had more, if I'm being honest. I thought I would have a lot of sleepless nights running up to July. There's do you feel that is because we were in a good place to start with, or are we a little complacent?
I think it was a big job to do in 12 months or 18 months, in all honesty. I think a lot of lenders have kind of worked on their bit, their price and value assessment up to April, and it's been a big job to do. So the 3 months following that to kind of go, well, what are we going to do with all our distributors is quite a short time scale. The best example I've got of that is when we started reading the price and value assessments, we very quickly realised that all the lenders were saying, if any vulnerabilities are identified, we want these reported to us before deal goes through. Makes sense. So the first thing I did was ring up your Alan Cooper and said, Alan, have you got a solution to actually digitally report this if someone comes through your system? That's a great question, Nick. And I know you guys ran off to the lenders, and the lenders were pretty much like, no, we haven't really thought about how we're going to get that. Yeah. And of course, if they're using a third party like yourselves, they're not going to have a direct line on every single deal or they're not going to log into every lender's system to then go, oh, I need to record a vulnerability. So for instance, that's one thing that hasn't been thought of, and is probably going to get done over the 6 months following Consumer Duty.
Yeah, there's been, we've definitely had conversations around vulnerable customers and recording. There's been that debate about, well, do we let a vulnerable customer identify themselves, or is the responsibility to identify? And a couple of lenders we've spoken to have said, if you put a flag on there, nobody will say they're vulnerable. So how do we deal with that? And I think that's one that's still, certainly for us, a conversation piece. I don't think anybody's got a perfect answer to that one yet. I think that's one that needs to be worked out.
We also work with authorisations, as you know. We've been discussing putting this right at the forefront. So people have been asking questions like, when do we try to identify vulnerabilities? So one thing we've said is, well, do it in your marketing for a start, or your website. So maybe you have a pop-up that says, do you have any additional needs through this process? What are they? If it's, I'm not great with technology, give them the option of a callback. So that's something that straight away you can identify in a way that the customer will engage with. Then you can do it in, let's say you've got a self-serve portal. It can be within there, do you need some assistance? This is why. And then finally do it with your agents. Where training and the human touch comes in, and people may open up, especially if you're having a discussion. And that can translate down to dealers as well.
You mentioned that you didn't particularly like the term vulnerability. Do you think we actually really know what a vulnerable customer looks like out there?
If I was 100% honest, I still don't think I would have my head around it to go, immediately I could identify someone. Yeah. And I think that's a problem.
Yeah.
Could be somebody who's had a breakup. Could be somebody, we used the example earlier, a nurse that's just worked a double shift and they're tired. There could be so many different things, just stressed at work. It's all classed as vulnerable.
I bought a stupid car after a divorce. I understand. There you go. I wish somebody had told me not to do it.
But that's classed as a vulnerable customer, and it's...
And equally, it's vulnerable circumstances.
Yeah.
So your archetypal vulnerable customer, I think most dealers would think is the guy who's got poor credit, and the guy who's got poor credit, who's actually coming to buy a car that he needs to get to work, it suits his needs, may not be in a vulnerable situation. They're actually in a positive situation during that buying journey. And of course, the lender will make sure they're not over indebted, etc. So it's not always as black and white as you think.
The other thing is, right, if they self-certify that they're vulnerable and you're manually underwriting, okay? If you're that underwriter and you see a vulnerable customer flag, therefore that's going to put more risk on that deal, surely. Is that going to change the underwriter's mindset and say, do you know what, this could go wrong, further down the line, we could have an ambulance chaser come for us. So I don't know if it's actually going to become kind of detrimental further down the line anyway. And, it's kind of like that with balloon payments, with PCPs and stuff like that. And you get the, I can't remember what you call it, when you can throw the car back, voluntary termination, The VT risk on it kind of outweighs the actual risk of doing that car. Would that be the same with vulnerable customers?
It's going to come out of the way.
I know, it's just like, I think it could have a real big adverse effect further down the line.
Yeah, we were talking about ambulance chases earlier before we started this. I think we've obviously seen it with they had great success with things like PPI, etc. They've had a go on PCP, which doesn't appear to be as successful.
Have they tried GAP yet? Have they tried GAP? I don't know.
I don't think they've tried GAP.
There's not enough value in the product.
Yeah, that's a good point. That is.
Yeah, probably. Do you think the industry has any further risk on that, or do you think?
I think they'll give it a go.
Seen the back.
Yeah, we said off camera, didn't we? It's there are other industries to go at. I think debt advice is going to be one. Funeral plans could be another. That the FCA have been very strict on guidance, but I think, pulling it back to Consumer Duty, it's just up to us to make sure that as an industry, we protect the whole industry by taking this seriously and trying to do the right thing. And I think if you try and do the right thing, PPI ultimately wasn't a bad product for a lot of people, but it was abused at the point of sale.
Yeah.
And everyone paid the penalty for that.
So what are the key things? You've obviously got the checklist. What are the key things on the checklist that you've got on there for retailers? What are you telling them?
There's one, and it's the main one that everything feeds off, is knowing your customer journey.
Yeah.
So where do you get customers from? All the different sources. What do they see? What do they get sent? Who speaks to them along that journey? And that goes then all the way through the internal process to after sales, not just reviews not just complaints that you get, but what reviews are being left on the internet, and what can you find out through that process that have customers understood are the products, the value, the understanding and the support there every step, and what data can you use to then feed back and improve that. And that's got to be a good business exercise. If you do nothing, just do that.
The reviews, that is so important to the FCA. The reviews, they got really good scraping software. We've got an AR network, and we have to really do our due diligence, not just through Google. We have to go through all the different search engines, all the different things, just to get every review possible. If there's 1 or 3 bad reviews out of 200, the FCA will flag it up. Why? And you've got to have a really good excuse for it. So all dealers, I cannot stress enough how important it is to have good reviews, look after your customers.
So jump forward 12 months. We've been through it all. We can all sleep again. How will it look in 12 months' time?
That's a good question.
I think 12 months is going to be a good review point to see, have we done this properly and can we improve? And I just hope it doesn't get forgotten about, because I think if we come back and go, well, what improvements have been made at all levels, that's going to be the start of a continual programme of improvement, which again gets the motor finance industry to a point where it's trusted and respected. And if it is, that's going to be more profitable for everyone, because there'll be more point of sale finance, and it'll be taken seriously. And it'd be nice to get away from that, a car dealer's just there to rip me off, because I think that hurts all of us, doesn't it, when we hear things like that.
Retailers there, they think they have a vulnerable customer. What should they do?
Well, the FCA do not say that you cannot sell a car to a vulnerable customer. You perfectly can. It's just you have to document it and make sure that it was a good customer outcome and prove that. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, in fact, the FCA actually say you shouldn't try to exclude vulnerable
Yes.
customers, and there is an opportunity within this from certain sectors, not necessarily motor, to remove vulnerable customers from the process,
Yeah.
and that's absolutely not what we're supposed to do. It's simply about how can we help people, and I think that's a real good mindset change
Customers-
to stop people being worried about actually
Yeah,
identifying them in the
If
first
the
place.
customer's made an informed decision, yes, they could be vulnerable, but they still want that car at the end of the day. And as long as that process is correct and documented, absolutely fine.
So, in terms of just finishing off, if there's one last bit of advice for our retailers or anybody out there that's been watching this concerned about Consumer Duty, what would it be?
Is don't be afraid of this. Engage in it. Look at the price. Look at the products you're offering. Are they suitable? Look at the price you're offering. You're not charging out too high just for the sake of making more commission. That you're supporting your customers and that your customers understand the journey. They're the 4 outcomes, and just take that seriously. And you'll be halfway towards doing the right thing overall.
Yeah. I'll agree with him.
Guys, great conversation. Thanks
Thank
for
you very
coming to the
much.
office. Thanks for joining us. Much appreciated.
Thanks very much.
Okay.
Thanks for inviting us.
Cheers.
Cheers.